1, 0.
Liftoff.
Liftoff.
Roger, this is Liberty Bell 7. The clock is operating. Loud and clear, Jose. Don't cry too much. Okie doke.
Mechanically, when I was young, my first wife, her daddy was a mechanic and ended up being the head of the Charlotte Fire Department mechanical division. And he taught me, and I learned from watching him. I went over to her house, and he'd be out, believe it or not, out beside the house. He didn't have a garage either at the time. And we would lay in the parking lot road and work on a car. And I learned, one of the biggest things, and I forgot it, I learned when you tighten up head bolts, you tighten them up over and over and over. You don't just do it one time, tighten them down and go. That's one of the first things I learned mechanically. It had to be right. And then I just learned, I didn't even know I was learning, but I learned from just watching him and helping him. And then he built him a garage. Then I helped him out there also. So that's where it started with me. And I always liked cars. And when I got old enough to buy cars and work on them, I did. Well, I took the 57 Chevrolet. Originally, I bought a new one when I just got out of high school. And then somebody offered me more than it was worth about 6 years later. And I sold it. And 3 months later, I was sick. So I worked till I found me another one. And I found believe it or not, same style, Bel Air Sport Coupe. But it was a Power Glide. And I wanted to make, mine was a straight drive with overdrive. So I wanted to make that one just like my original one. So I did. I took the transmission out, welded all the materials on the bottom to change gears, bought me an old used 57 car to take the bell housing out of to match mine. And that's where I really got into mechanical. Garage ownership happened because I had cars at home, and I was doing the same thing I did when I worked with my dad-in-law. I was laying out, started out in the gravel behind the house, and then I finally got a pad poured that you could kind of lay on the concrete. And then about 8 or 10 years later, me and my wife built a garage. We built it ourselves, and then made 2 or 3 bays and started working on them. I had a place inside, concrete, and then eventually got a lift that I could do anything I wanted to in the garage.
So basically, listening to what Dad's just told you, I kind of did the same thing with him that he did with my grandfather. I started out actually being holding the light still for him to work at night when things got dark. Somebody's got to hold the flashlight, and I learned pretty quick there's a right way and a wrong way to hold a flashlight, and I was usually doing it the wrong way because I was watching what I wanted to see instead of where he was trying to work. So that's how I kind of got into watching him, and whether he knew it or not, I was paying a lot more attention to what he was doing than he thought it was. And I've got a natural mechanical inclination. I can pick things up. I like to take things apart, see how they work, put them back together, and that's kind of where my mechanical or my car passion started. And I've still got, of my first 3 cars, I've still got 2 of them, and I learned it by working on them. Simple stuff, changing the spark plugs, changing the valve cover gaskets. And it worked into restoring cars because his dad was a GM guy, and my grandfather, my mother's father, was a Ford guy. Mm-hmm. So he always had Fords. Growing up, I don't remember him ever having a Chevrolet.
I always felt comfortable in a Chevy, though. I really did. For some reason, General Motors suited me. But in the mid-'60s is when I fell in love with Corvette, but I couldn't afford to buy them. But finally, when I got old enough, or children were raised and didn't have to raise them anymore, I found the 66 that I truly love. So that's where I am with Corvette.
My affinity with Chevrolet started when I was probably 4.5 years old. And it goes back to the whole thing. He gets a kick out of this because he knows the story. When we lived in the city of Charlotte, when he couldn't afford a Corvette, he bought Impalas. And when I was, I was born in 62, so this had been a 65. He had a 65 Impala, white with a red interior. Right. And it had a white shifter knob on it. It was a 4-speed car. And I'm still looking for this car. I've got the VIN number, so I know what it is if I can ever find it. It's the first car I ever drove. And I was 4 years old. I was standing up on the front seat. It had the bench. It was a bench seat, bucket seats.
bench seats.
And the white shifter knob, and I'm standing up there and I'm driving it. Well, our driveway had a little bit of an inclination to it. And the neighbors across the street, across the street and had a big open yard. So I'm up there, and somehow or other, I pulled it out of gear into neutral. And here me and the car go. I was by myself. They were in the house or wherever they're at, and I backed it across the driveway. So at 4.5 years old, my first car that I ever drove was a 65 Impala. And it had Super Sport hubcaps, but it wasn't a Super Sport car. But it was a 327 and it had the 4-speed. And like I said, I've got the VIN number, and if I can ever find it, it will be in this building somewhere. Corvettes, okay, let's see. I'd have been, after I graduated high school, I was probably 17, almost going on 18. And for Christmas, I'd asked Dad and Mom, I said, look, help me find a mid-year Corvette. That's what I want to find. I want to restore one. And he told me, he said, we can't find anything. At that time in 80, 81, 82, it's a used Chevrolet. People didn't really care much about them back then. He said, I can't see spending that kind of money on a car that's that old. He said, well, so we'll go look and see if we can find you. The new Camaros were just coming out. We'll go look at those. So we did. We rode out to the Chevrolet dealership and looked. And lo and behold, right there on the showroom floor was an 82 Corvette, the last body style of the C3s before they went to the 84s. And it was beautiful. I think it was a silver blue or something that was sitting there. And I said, that's the one I want right there. Well, being the smart dad that he is, at that time a Corvette was $20,000. He said, I can't afford to help finance that. He said, let's look at the Camaros. So we did. Got an estimate on our invoice on what it would cost. He said, all right, go to another dealership and see what they'll quote it for you. Well, I ran up to the second dealership the next week and walked in with my future wife, and being a young kid, walked up to the salesman and said, I'd like to speak to somebody about pricing out a new Camaro Z28. And I remember this as clear as day. The guy says, son, those things are high. I don't think you can afford one. So I went back home, no estimate from that dealership, went back home and told Dad this. He said, all right, we'll go back to the first dealership next weekend and order you that car. And it's sitting back here in the corner. I've already showed it to you. We still own that car today. It's never left the family. It's been the family, and it's in the process of being restored probably in the next year or so. So that's where it started. I wanted a Corvette then. We just couldn't afford it. So that would have been 81, 82.
All right, this 65 green Grissom Corvette came to me through an accidental conversation with a guy. And he came in the store where I was working, and he said, don't you like Corvettes? I said, I sure do. He said, well, I got a neighbor who's got one he's going to sell. Are you interested? I said, well, yes, I'd like to go look at it. It's not too high. He said, well, let me give you his name and number. I said, okay. I'll take his number, and I will go see him Saturday. So Saturday, I told Mark, I said, the guy's got a Corvette. Let's go look at it. So we get my truck and ride up to Huntersville. In his garage, he's saying he's in his garage, and there's a body of a car, 65, and then parts everywhere, all around the garage, under the house, in the attic. And I said, where's the parts for this car? Oh, yeah, I've got them all. They're here. I said, well, good. So I said, well, we'll let you know. So we came back home. We thought about it a little bit, and I said, told Mark, let's just go ahead and buy that car. So we go back up there, buy the car, and we haul it home in two pickup trucks.
Two pickup trucks and a trailer.
We had parts everywhere. My wife thought I was crazy as a bat, but we kind of knew what it was. But we got the thing home, and Mark started looking at it, and I started looking at it. But the engine was sitting on a jack stand, and it was froze up. I said, well, we'll figure out how to get that fixed. So I said, let's buy it. So we went ahead and bought it and started working on it. And just piece by piece and month after month. And Mark, when he was at the fire department, on his days off, he'd come out there and spend all day. We took the body was on the frame. We took it back off again and then sandblasted the frame completely. And I had a backhoe. I'd pick it up, and he'd reach on the bottom and sandblast underneath it. So we got it all cleaned up. Then he bought the paint from GM, not this shiny black paint, but the flame paint that came on the car. So he painted it right there in the backyard. Then we set it down, and he started working.
And the first time we went there, I said, we need to see what all was there. So Daddy told the guy, said, look, he said, lay all the parts out, get everything into one location so we can see what's there. So we went back up there the following week, like you said, and we looked at everything, and sure enough, it looked like pretty much all there. And, Daddy made the deal, said, yeah, we'll buy the car. And he said, just down in passing, he said, oh, I forgot to tell y'all, supposedly that belonged to one of the Mercury astronauts. I said, really? He said, yeah, supposedly it belonged to Gus Grissom. And that was all that was said. There was no mention of, got this, I found this on the car. It's just, the rumor is it belonged to Gus Grissom.
We didn't really believe it, but we couldn't question it.
I thought it was just kind of like, in order for me to sell this car, I'm going to tell them this. So sure enough, we took it back home, and this was in March of '99. Took it to his basement in the hardware store he owns, and it sat there from '99 till 2004. And I was in the process of redoing the first one I've got. I've got that 66 big block there. I was about 90% done on it. Got it done, and life kind of got in the way, and things got slowed down. In 2004, I told Daddy, I started kind of doing some research on it. And we wanted to inventory what parts we had and what parts we needed. So, made a list. I've still got the list of the house of what the guy had already bought, what came with the car, what was original to the car. So we made a list of it. And I was going through one of the Tupperware parts because the guy we bought it from said some of the parts had been sanitized. That's what he called it, not clean, but sanitized. So, I found the original radio, which was out of the car then, but it was in a box, kind of down with some other parts. So I was just looking at it, and I noticed on top of the radio that there was a piece of masking tape, and it looked like it was very old. So I just kind of brushed off the dust on it, and I said, well, there's something written on it. So I got to looking, and it had the name Grissom written on it. So I'm like, well, he didn't say anything about the radio having the name Grissom, and that would have surely been a selling point if that's what he was trying to do. So I started doing some research, and at the time, Mr. Rathman was still alive. And my wife actually, she's the one that facilitated it, made arrangements for us to go and meet him in Melbourne back in 2000. So I went and sat down and talked to him, and he was very cordial and said, yeah, they bought them from me, and this is the deal, and $1 a year, and some bought Corvettes, some bought Chevelles, some bought Cadillacs. But he said, of the three astronauts, the big three that liked the Corvette were Shepard, Grissom, and Cooper. So they were always trying to one-up each other. And at the time, he had a lot of the invoices from the cars, but he didn't have the one for this one. But in talking to Gus's son, he laid out a list of what he had. He said, what cars his dad owned, what color they were, what engines were in them, and that's kind of where it went. I've researching started in 2000, and I'm still today looking for stuff on the internet, so it's out there. Well, it took several years before I had the list of names I showed you earlier, previous owners from Alabama. That's, the car went from, and I've confirmed through the NCRS that it went to Rasmus dealership news, so I know it went to his dealership. And then it ended up in the Huntsville, Alabama area, which was big into NASA. They had all kind of plants up there. And I got a list of names of people in the Huntsville area that owned it. Well, I just kind of put that aside and started focusing on just a couple of people, Mr. Rathman and Scott Grissom and those. Well, it was probably, 5-10 years ago, I had the list. I said, I'm just out of curiosity, I'm going to see if any of these people are still alive, and we'll talk about it. So I called the first name, and the lady I talked about, and I mentioned her in the magazine articles, answered the phone. Her husband's name was Dickie Sledge, and I asked for him. And she said, well, I'm sorry, but he passed away in November of the previous year. Maybe I can help you. I said, well, I want to ask him about a Corvette that he owned previously. She said, well, maybe I can help you. I'm kind of familiar with him. I said, well, it was a 65 green coupe. And without any prompting, she said, oh, you mean Gus Grissom's car. So I kind of knew I was on the right road. And then finding some of the writing on the firewall and on the windshield, and then videos I found, that just all added up. And, the name on the radio, I don't know how many green Corvettes went to 1965 coupes with the white interior and that engine with Gus Grissom's name on the radio went to Rathman Chevrolet. Well, in regards to the astronauts themselves, being a kid, I was born in '62, so I missed, the Mercury stuff was on the tail end of it. I mean, I think if I remember right, Cooper might have been the last one to go up for the Mercury program. I was in '63, so I was about a year old. But I do remember the moon landings. At the time, astronauts were bigger than life. I mean, they were heroes, just because of what they did. I mean, when you see some of the old videos of the rockets sitting on the pad and exploding as soon as they light them, or going up a couple thousand feet and then exploding, anybody that's got that kind of nerve is going to be a hero. And they were bigger than life.
Got to be a hero.
Yeah,
who else would get in a rocket? Go. Got to be a hero. Oh, I remember we watched every minute of it that was on TV. Never missed any of it. You were glued to it. And it made the whole country happy. It really did. It brought the whole country together. I think the space deal and the moon brought our country together as one.
I agree.